Hello and welcome to the daily newspaper analysis. Today we shall be discussing the newspaper of the 13th of February, but before that a correction. In yesterday's video, by mistake, the date has been written wrongly. It should have been 12th of February, so please make that correction. Now coming to the first article, the Jallikattu challenge. The context here is that the Jallikattu issue has now been referred to a constitutional bench of the Supreme Court of India. So that is the context. Now coming to some background, first and foremost about Jallikattu. Jallikattu is a bull taming sport. It is largely played in the states of Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka. This is a sport that goes back approximately 1000 years back to the Sangam literature era. So that is something that is important with regards to Jallikattu. Also, this sport is criticized for causing immense degree of cruelty and pain to the animal that is involved, which is the bulls in this case. So that is the controversy regarding Jallikattu. In the year 2014, the Supreme Court had banned the sport of Jallikattu on the grounds of under the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act of 1960. The Supreme Court had said that this sport is causing immense cruelty, and as a result of which it cannot be permitted. Now this was followed by severe protests in the state of especially Tamil Nadu, and later the Tamil Nadu State Assembly amended this act, the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act of 1960. This was, despite the fact that this was an act passed by the Parliament, this was amended by the State Assembly of Tamil Nadu, and after that this sport has been continuing in Tamil Nadu, and recently there have been several deaths of onlookers who had come to see this particular sport. So that is something that is vital from the background aspect. Now coming to the issues which have been analyzed, the first issue is with regards to the complexity of this entire matter of Jallikattu. Now the complexity is itself evident from the fact that the matter has now been shifted to the constitutional bench, despite the fact that a judgment was given by the Supreme Court in 2014. The matter was not resolved. So definitely it is a very complex issue. Not only that, it is a very politicized issue in the country. So that is something that is important here. Another thing is with regards to Tamil Nadu's amendment of the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act of 1960. Now, as I discussed previously also, this was a central act, and as a result of which many experts have raised a question as to whether Tamil Nadu was in a position to amend this act, because Tamil Nadu State Assembly could not have overpowered a law that was passed by the Parliament. So this is one question. However, another analysis is that under the 7th schedule of the Constitution, the issue of cruelty to animals is something that is in the concurrent list, and as a result of which the State Assembly of Tamil Nadu had the right to justify or to analyze that which act constitutes cruelty to animals within the territories of that particular state. So some experts are saying that this amendment can be justified. So that is one important aspect. Another thing is that the constitutional bench is going to analyze whether or not this amendment by the Tamil Nadu State Assembly was a case of colorable legislation. Now this is important. What you understand by colorable legislation is that if a law is passed in guise to promote some other implicit law. For example, in this amendment, Tamil Nadu State Assembly has said that it wants to protect the breeds of the bulls, and as a result of which it is providing this exception to Jallikattu under the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act. But questions are being raised that this is only being used as a carpet to cover the actual intention of promoting this sport as such. So the question is going to be raised whether or not this is a case of colorable legislation. So that is something that is important. Another thing is with regards to the cultural and traditional rights. Now you need to know that under Article 29 of the Constitution of India, all citizens have a fundamental right to protect their culture and their traditional rights, and this claim which the activists in Tamil Nadu, or for that matter even the Tamil Nadu government, is raising, that the citizens very much have a right to protect Jallikattu because this is a cultural sport. It is a sport which has a history of 1000 years. So in that respect, they are very much justified. Another thing is with regards to saving the native breeds. Now this, as I told you, was a claim made by the state government, and this is a question which the constitutional bench is now going to examine as to whether or not it is going to ensure in saving these native breeds, and are there other mechanisms to save these native breeds. So that is something that is important here. Another thing is a question of fundamental duties is what is being analyzed. Now under Article 51A of the Constitution, there are some fundamental duties, and in these fundamental duties are duties like protecting the environment. So it is being analyzed that can this this ambit of fundamental duties be expanded to protecting the animals also. So that is something that is important. However, you need to know that the fundamental duties are not justiciable. So even if it can be concluded that it is incumbent upon the citizens to protect the animals, it is something that cannot be justified, or it cannot be something that can be enforced through law. So that is something that is important here. Another thing that the Constitutional Bench is going to examine is with regards to the 2014 judgment of the Supreme Court. And it is going to examine whether or not the Tamil Nadu government is guilty of a contempt of court with regards to this judgment. So that is something that is going to be analyzed. Another thing that is going to be analyzed is with regards to the fundamental rights. Now, this is something that is important. Article 14 and Article 21 of the Constitution of India, which provides some fundamental rights, is something that is going to be examined. Now, Article 14 provides a fundamental right to equality, and Article 21 provides a fundamental right to life and liberty, and also a life with dignity. Now, it is being questioned that can these rights be extended to animals also? Now, initially, the constitutional rights are all envisaged for the citizens of India, and there is no ground for expanding this to the animals and other living beings in the country. However, experts are saying that they can be expanded if a wider analysis is taken. Because if Article 14, that is the right to equality, is expanded to animals also, then under this particular act, the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, bulls cannot be excluded from this act, and any cruelty to other animals is also going to be a cruelty to the bulls. So that is something that is going to be analyzed. Another thing is that the right to life with dignity, are animals also subject to this particular right, and should animals also have a life with dignity, is something that is being questioned. But you need to know that India has never believed in the idea of rights to animals. All the animal welfare programs within the country are largely grounded on the aspect of welfareism. They are based on the idea of morality and decency, and there is no issue of such rights to animals. So that is something that you need to know here. Another thing is with regards to constitutional silence. Now, the Constitution is silent with regards to the issues related to animals. And so it becomes incumbent largely upon the Parliament to make laws in this regard. And the law that the Parliament had made was this Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act of 1960. However, under this particular act, the Parliament has made several exceptions, and it is these exceptions which are leading to the next point of other cruelties. For example, under this act, it is allowed that experimentation for drugs can be carried out on animals. Not only that, this act also allows for killing any animal in a manner required by any religion or any community. So the question that is being raised is that if these cruelties is what is allowed, then why is the government now trying to ban Jallikattu on the grounds of cruelty to animals? So if safeguards have to be ensured, then these safeguards should be universal and not one particular sport should be targeted. So this is largely a politicized matter. That is something that is important here. Another thing which is important is with regards to a wider interpretation of Article 21. Now here the question is that when there is a constitutional silence on this issue, also fundamental rights concept cannot be applied, fundamental duties cannot be extended, then why is this matter being examined by the Constitutional Bench? That is one prima facie question that should arise. Now, it is in this context that the editorial has given a very good analysis. Here, the author has said that to justify the formation of a constitutional bench and to provide some constitutional safeguards to the bulls, what is important is that a wider interpretation of Article 21 is what the court should do. Now, this article is largely about a right to life and liberty, and this often is expanded to include a right to life and liberty, dignity. So various other aspects is what is included. A newer aspect is what is being advocated is to include within its ambit to live in a society which is free of animal cruelty, and that shows empathy to all living beings. So if this is the analysis, this is the expansion which Supreme Court is going to envisage, then definitely Supreme Court can ensure a ban on Jallikattu, as citizens should have a right to live in a society which is not cruel. So that is one very good analysis which he has given. So this is something that is important for you. Another thing that the editorial discusses is about two choices which the Supreme Court is faced with. One choice is that the Supreme Court should uphold this particular law, that is the amended law of the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, especially because there is a constitutional silence in this regard, and the Supreme Court will not be able to delve into this matter because of this constitutional silence. But definitely ethically and morally this cannot be justified. So second choice is what has been advocated is that the Supreme Court can take a moral stand, and it could advocate a new constitutional theory. So this is something that has been analyzed here. The issue of Jallikattu is very important, not only because it is an ethical and moral issue, but also because it is a very politicized issue. So a question can be asked in this regard, and you should have a deeper understanding of all the aspects. So that is the importance of this article. Now coming to the next article, expanding horizons. Now the context here is with regards to the multi-dimensional engagements that India is having with West Asia. Now you should know that recently Prime Minister has visited West Asia. He is visiting 3 countries in West Asia, and it is the 5th visit by the Prime Minister in 3 years. So that is something that is the relevance here. Now coming to the 3 countries which Prime Minister is visiting. One is Oman, second is UAE, and the third and the most important visit is to Palestine, which is this small yellow area which you can see here in the map. Now coming to the issues which are important, the first issue is with regards to India's Look West policy. Now for long India had an initially India had a Look East policy, which has now been changed to the Act East policy. So largely what has happened is that India has focused on the eastern aspect or the eastern countries and has for a long time ignored the western countries. So now India has finally decided to focus more on the West Asian countries also, and in that respect India has advocated the Look West policy. So this is something that you need to know with regards to West Asia. Another thing is with regards to the conflicts in this region. Now, this region has largely been a region of conflict even in the past, and even currently there are a number of conflicts in this region. For example, there is a concern with regards to Iran. The issue of Iran nuclear deal is something that is important. Not only that, there is a conflict between Saudi Arabia, which is a Sunni dominated country, versus a Shia dominated Iran. So that is one conflict. Another thing is that Syria is facing immense problems. There's a civil war within Syria, so that is why this area is a conflict prone area. Another thing is Iraq is also not stable here. So definitely this area has severe problems, and the most stark is the Israel-Palestine issue. So that is the entire concern with regards to this area, that this area is a restless area. So that is something that is important. Another thing is with regards to the India-Palestine relations. Now what is important and what is the key word with regards to Palestine relations is the dehyphenated diplomacy which India is now advocating. Initially India used to link Israel and Palestine together. Now India has decided that the policy will be dehyphenated and relationship with Israel will be separate and relationship with Palestine will be separate. So that is what is meant by the idea of dehyphenated policy. Now coming to some important developments with regards to the India-Palestine issue. First is that this is the first ever visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Palestine. So it is a major visit. Also, this is weeks after the much hyped visit by the Israeli Prime Minister to India. So this is a stark reflection that India has really changed its diplomacy and its foreign relations, that India is dealing with both the two belligerent countries equally well. So that is one analysis. This is in line with the dehyphenated policy and politics which India is now following. Another thing is that India is looked upon with immense respect within the West Asian region, and this relation that India has, a strong relation with both Israel as well as Palestine, can give India a leverage in this particular area to resolve the Israel-Palestine issue. India can have a major voice in resolution of this particular issue. So that is the importance which India has for West Asia. That is something that is important for you to understand. Also, India has signed 6 agreements worth $50 million with Palestine. That is something that you need to know. Another thing which is important is that Palestine has given the Prime Minister of India the Grand Collar of the State of Palestine. So this is a major development again. Another thing is that India has been continuously supporting a sovereign and independent Palestine, despite the fact that India is warming up its relation with Israel. So this is something that you need to understand. This is vital. And this is in line with this next point, which is India's centric foreign policy. Now here you need to understand that previously India's foreign policy was not largely very much an India-centric policy. For example, if India believed that Israel is harming Palestine, then India would cut its relation with Israel also, without considering the fact that in Israel could be beneficial for India. For example, India only started official relationship with Israel from the year 1992 onwards, and previous to that, India had no relations with Israel. So here you need to understand that this policy is something that has changed, and now India is following an openly India-centric policy where it is going to engage with every single country which is going to be in the benefit of India, irrespective of that country's ideology. So this is a newer development with regards to India's foreign policy, and this is something that is important. Another analysis is with regards to the India-UAE relation, because the Prime Minister is set to visit UAE as well. Now, this is the second visit by Indian Prime Minister in the past 3 years, and the major focus with regards to UAE is on trade and economy in this particular region. Also, the Indian oil companies will now invest in the UAE oil sectors. This is a major shift, because previously UAE as well as India only had a buyer-seller relation, and now this relation is rising up to become an investor relationship. So this is definitely a major development. Another thing is that in UAE, the issue was with regards to the contractual employees who are migrating from India to UAE. So that was one issue. In this regard, an MOU has been signed which will institutionalize the collaborative administration of contractual employees in UAE. So that is a major development between the two countries. This is something that is important here. And both these countries have also condemned religious terrorism. Now this is important because UAE has a major relations with Pakistan, and UAE can act as a leverage to curb terrorism emanating from the Pakistani soil. This is something that is relevant for India. Now, another thing which is important is with regards to India-Oman relation. Now, first and foremost, the importance of Oman can be itself analyzed from the geographic location of Oman. Oman is a littoral state, and so Oman also has its stakes in the Indian Ocean region, which is at present the most controversial region in the entire world. So that is something that is important. Here, India is partnering with Oman for peace in Indian Ocean region. They are going to have naval as well as military cooperation in this region. Oman is also in the favor of curbing the rise of China in this region. So that is one thing that Oman is important for with regards to India. Another thing is that in Oman, India constitutes the largest expatriate community. So that is also one relevance for between the India-Oman relation. So this is something that you need to analyze. Now, another thing which is important here is with regards to the rise of China in this entire sector. In entire West Asia, China has immense dominance. So definitely partnering with West Asia is in the interest of rebalancing and in curbing China's influence. So that is something that is important. Another thing that you need to know is that India has had some traditional concerns in the West Asian region. For example, the West Asian region is largely dominated by monarchs and sultans. Another thing is that the Israel-Palestine conflict was something that was predominant in this region. Also, the Shia-Sunni divide was something that was common. So these were some traditional concerns because of which India did not focus much on West Asia in the past, but India has indeed overcome these traditional concerns, and now India has the Look West policy, which is favoring and focusing much more on the West Asia. So this is something that you need to know. Now, another issue which has been analyzed in the editorial is with regards to the delivery of commitments. Now, it is this area where India is largely lax compared to China. China is known for delivering on its commitments, and India is known for being slow in its delivery of commitments. So here the editorial analyzes that for India to ensure efficient and robust partnership with the West Asian countries, it is important that India should deliver the commitments that the Prime Minister is making in these countries. So that is something that is important. Another thing that is important with regards to West Asia is the US-Russia conflict in this area. Now, you need to know that this region is largely a region of proxy war, because especially in Syria, both US and Russia are backing different groups, and as a result of which it is being said as a newer zone for Cold War. Definitely there is this conflict, and here India can play a role of a leader. It can play a peaceful role. So that is something that is important. West Asia will be important in the international relations this year. So that is the relevance. Now, coming to the next article. Now, this article is not a very important one, but it has a few points which we can use. Now, coming to the context is that the adaptation projects which are being developed in several countries in the backdrop of climate change. So an analysis is drawn upon the efficacy of these adaptation projects. So that is the context. Now coming to the issues which have been raised, the first issue is with regards to an unequal power structure and vulnerables. Now here the editorial discusses that there are several funds for adaptation projects. For example, at the global level, there is a global adaptation fund under the UN, and also these funds are there even at the country level. But the issue is that due to an unequal power structure globally as well as within the countries, the vulnerables are unable to get a benefit from them, and these funds are largely being targeted at the better off countries or the better off people within a country. So that is something that this editorial has brought to the fore. Another thing that has been discussed is with regards to a concept of political economy. Now here the analysis is about how multi-scale political forces influence the economic distribution of funds. So that is something that has been analyzed. Another aspect here is with regards to the power struggles for the limited resource of adaptation funds. So definitely there is a political struggle for these adaptation funds. So that is something that has been analyzed. 4 E's is what the author has talked about. The first E is with regards to the enclosure. Now here the author says that often private agents are acquiring public assets in the name of adaptation projects. So that is one fear which has been flagged. Another thing is with regards to exclusion. Now here the author says that often what happens in these adaptation projects is that some stakeholders are largely excluded, and especially the marginalized sections are the ones who are excluded from these adaptation projects. So that is something that has been analyzed. Another thing is with regards to an encroachment. Now here what has been analyzed is that often the adaptation action leads to encroachment of the areas which are rich in biodiversity. For example, if a project is there to protect the forest, then what might happen is that a traditionally tribal region where there was no further previous encroachment by the government or by the private sector is now going to be protected, and these people are going to be shunted out from their traditional area. So this is something that has been highlighted here. Another thing is an issue of entrenchment, which is a condition of under this, it is being analyzed that often due to the adaptation project, what happens is that the conditions of those who are vulnerable further worsens. For example, the poor, the marginalized, the tribals, the women. So often these projects can result in some entrenchment. So that is something that has been analyzed here. Now some suggestions is what has been given. The first suggestion is that the problem, all these problems associated with the adaptation project is something that needs to first and foremost be acknowledged, because it's only after that they are acknowledged that mechanisms can be designed to mitigate them. So that is something that has been advocated. Another suggestion is with regards to an all stakeholder approach. Here the author is saying that all the stakeholders involved in the adaptation project is something that should be taken into consideration, and the rights and the concerns of all the stakeholders should be protected. So that is something that has been analyzed. Another thing is with regards to lessons for India. Now this entire analysis has several lessons for India also, because India is a deeply stratified society and a number of adaptation projects are what are going on in India. So all these global experiments or global problems have some message for India also. So that is something that has been analyzed here. Another analysis is with regards to technology not a viable solution. Now this is the most important analysis for us. This is the most relevant one. Now here you need to understand that whenever there is a problem of climate change, largely the solution is sought in technology. For example, drip irrigation is advocated, or watershed development is advocated if there is a scarcity of water. But all of this, the author is saying, is not going to ensure relief to the people, because social and political conditions is something that should also be analyzed. For example, in India, the large section of farmers are approximately more than 80% of the farmers are small and marginal. So even if these technology solutions like drip irrigation is advocated, then it is not going to largely benefit these small farmers, but it is going to benefit the 20% of the bigger farmers. So this clearly means that technology has definitely been advocated, but social and political concerns have not been addressed. So this is something that is important. Here the author talks about equity, justice and social hierarchy, which should also be focused upon. Otherwise, the editorial analyzes that if this is not done, then it will lead to further deepening of existing social, economic and ecological problems. Now, why I have taken this particular editorial for analysis is that definitely there will not be a particular question on adaptation projects per se, but you can bring about this point that with technological solution, what is vital is that social concerns are also flagged, and that is the importance of this entire editorial. Also, a few years back in the ethics paper, there was a question on environmental ethics. So there also these points of equity, justice, and social hierarchy is something that is going to be important. So that is one aspect which can be relevant from environment paper point of view. So that is the importance here. Now coming to the next article, more nukes. Now the context here is that the Nuclear Posture Review of 2018 has recently been released by the United States of America, and some analysis with regards to this Nuclear Posture Review is what is vital. So the first issue is with regards to a shift in policy. Now this recent NPR has marked a stark shift in the policy from the Obama era to the now Trump era. So that is something that is important. Another thing is that there is a clause of some extreme conditions in this Nuclear Posture Review which has been widened. Now previously under this review, it was said that US will only use nuclear weapon under some extreme conditions. Now what has happened under the new review policy is that this ambit of extreme conditions has been widened. Previously, these extreme conditions only included conditions when US was to be attacked by a nuclear weapon. Now this has been done away with, and under the new regime, even a non-nuclear aggression towards US can be responded with a nuclear attack by US. So this is something that is a major cause of concern, because traditionally, there has been a policy that nuclear armed countries will never attack non-nuclear armed countries with nuclear weapons. So doing away with this clause is something that has raised several global fears against nuclear weapons. So this is something that is important. Another aspect is with regards to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Now the Non-Proliferation Treaty has called upon all the nuclear powers to cut down the nuclear arsenal and for finally going for complete disarmament. Now, if US is going to openly claim that it is going to increase its arsenal, then in that case, the viability or the credibility of the NPT is something that is completely flawed, and the relevance of NPT is nowhere existing. So that is something that is important. Another thing is that in the year 2010, both US and Russia had signed a new strategic arms reduction treaty where both US and Russia had decided that they will strategically reduce their arms. So this new review, nuclear posture review by US is something that has given a death blow to this reduction treaty also, because this is going to again lead to an arms race. So this is something that is important. Another thing is with regards to low intensity usable nuclear weapons. Now, previously, the nuclear weapons in the arsenal of USA were very powerful nuclear weapons. So in that situation, they themselves acted as a deterrent, because then USA would not have used them very continuously. But US is now following a newer policy where it is going to make nuclear weapons of lower intensity to now ensure greater usage of these nuclear weapons. So this is something that is again being seen as a threat globally. That is one issue. Now, as I mentioned before also, that this is going to lead to an arms race. So this is being called as the 21st century arms race, and this is a major fear. Another thing is with regards to China. China is also building up its arsenal and its missiles, its ballistic missiles. So that is something that is a cause of concern. Also with regards to Russia. Russia is following the policy of escalating to de-escalate. And Russia says that it is raising its arsenal on the grounds that NATO is continuously rising, and NATO actually was formed in the backdrop of the Cold War. So Russia says that when the Cold War has finally ended, then why is NATO not being ended? NATO is continuously expanding. So in that context, Russia is raising its arsenal. Also in the year 2014, Russia had invaded Ukraine. So this was a major stimulus to US. This was a point which marked the lowest relations between US and Russia after Cold War, was in the aftermath of Russia invasion of Ukraine. So because of that also, both these countries are stimulated to raise their arsenal. So that is one analysis which has been drawn. Another thing is that because of this invasion by Russia, US has been setting up its ballistic missile installation in countries like Poland and Romania, and this is not to the liking of Russia. So that is another analysis which has been given in this particular editorial. Now, another important analysis is with regards to North Korea, because North Korea has recently become a nuclear powered country. Now, when North Korea gained nuclear powers, US criticized North Korea openly and called for North Korea to sign the NPT. So in this backdrop, US itself is going to raise its nuclear arsenal, then moral questions are raised on the policy followed by US. So that is something that is analyzed, and it is going to give a death blow to the entire disarmament programs, which was something that was favored globally. Even India has called upon the world to follow disarmament. So this is something that is important. This nuclear posture review is something that you can refer in your answers, especially with regards to nuclear weapons, with regards to NPT, with regards to US-Russia relation. So that is the vital importance of this particular report by the US. Now coming to the next article, unending pain. Now the context here is that the State Bank of India has given its quarterly report, and under this report it has reported losses to the tune of 2,416 crore, and this is the largest ever losses reported by the SBI in the past 19 years. So that is the context. Now coming to the issues which are important, first is the cause for these losses. The first and the obvious cause is the rising non-performing assets of all the banks. Another cause is with regards to the market losses that banks are facing due to the falling prices of the government bonds. This is largely because fiscal deficit of the government is increasing and the government is issuing more and more bonds, as a result of which the bond prices is falling. So is falling, and as a result of which the banks are facing several losses. So that is one concern which has been raised. Another thing is that SBI has recently gone for all the mergers of several banks, as a result of which also it might be a cause that the losses of the State Bank of India is something that have risen. So that is the analysis here. Another thing is with regards to the reclassification of losses. Now previously what the banks were doing is that they were not classifying their losses very clearly, and as a result of which the RBI had to interfere, and now the RBI has reclassified the accounts of and the assets of all the banks, and as a result of this reclassification also the losses is something that has risen, because the non-performing assets of the bank is something that has been risen in the aftermath of this reclassification. So it is largely a matter of lack of transparency in classification of assets by the banks, which has now been corrected by the RBI. So that is one issue that is important. Another thing with regards to the non-performing assets is what has been analyzed here, that the NPAs are expected to rise to the tune of rupees 9.5 lakh crore in the year 2018. So this is a figure that I would suggest you should know, that NPA problem is rising in the country. Another thing is with regards to the reforms which the government has brought. For example, the government had brought about some bankruptcy reforms in the last year to ensure the easy exit for ailing companies. That is something that the government had done. Also now the government is envisaging recapitalization funds to be given to these banks, but all of them are being considered as something that are not efficient enough or not sufficient for meeting this huge burden of NPA. So that is one concern which has been highlighted in the editorial. Another thing is with regards to the lax corporate governance in these banks itself. Now the issue here is that the banks are largely responsible for the NPA problem, and this is something that has not been focused upon. This is what is stemming to the next point, which is about structural reforms. Despite all the steps that the government is taking in this regard, several experts are raising questions about the structural reforms which the government is not doing with regards to the governance in banks. And so questions are being raised that even if the health of the banks are restored, there cannot be a guarantee that this problem will not be repeated until and unless the structural reforms is something that is ensured in the bank. So that is one analysis which is important here. The issue of NPAs is very important. It is a major economic concern for the country as of now. So that is the relevance here. Now coming to the next article, BNP in a bind. Now this article is not very important. It only has few important points. This article is regarding the Bangladesh political crisis. What has happened in Bangladesh is that the major opposition party under Mrs. Khalida Zia, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, is now facing severe crisis because Mrs. Khalida Zia has been convicted by a court in Bangladesh, and it is doubtful if she will be fighting elections in the coming parliamentary elections in Bangladesh to be held in the year 2019. So that is one issue, and Bangladesh is largely a two-party country. One is the Bangladesh Nationalist Party and the other is the Awami League. So questions are being raised that if this year the BNP is unable to fight elections, so what will be the legitimacy of the democratic process in Bangladesh? That is one question which is being raised. You need to know that even in the previous election of 2014, what had happened was that BNP had boycotted the election. So there also the questions were raised whether or not the elections were legitimate. It was a clear sweep for the Awami League, and if this is repeated this year also, then in that in that case, several questions regarding the viability of democracy within Bangladesh is something that is going to be raised. Now, what is the importance of this entire issue for India? The importance is that India was one of the first countries in 2014 which acknowledged the newly formed Bangladeshi government, because at that point of time there was a severe international criticism to this newer government in Bangladesh. Now, if elections again in 2019 are going to be held without the opposition party fighting for elections, then a question is going to be raised whether or not India should acknowledge or accept the election results. So that is one moral and ethical question which will be raised. This also becomes important because in Maldives, in the case of Maldives, as we have discussed, there is a question about no democracy in Maldives, and India has been continuously advocating that democracy should be upheld. So if India is advocating that for one small country, then the same standard should be maintained for another country, which will be Bangladesh also. So that is the moral and ethical question. It is a tough diplomatic question which is going to come for India in future. So that is the importance which this entire issue has for India. Definitely this development will have these developments will be followed up in future editorials, so definitely we'll discuss it there. So that's about today's discussion. Some questions for you all to attempt based on our discussion today. Please try and attempt them in a word limit of 150 words. So with this we finish today's discussion. I thank you all for watching and I hope to see you tomorrow.